This episode is presented to you by NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. With NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV, you can watch your favorite teams' out-of-market Sunday games, plus watch up to 4 games at once with Multiview. Don't miss the race to the playoffs. NFL Sunday Ticket is now just $39 when bundled with YouTube TV, where you get even more football. Visit youtube.com/Spotify offer to sign up now. Lowest price on YouTube TV with base plan. Rest of 2023 season. Terms and embargoes apply. No cancellations.
Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
The holidays are a time to feel and create joy. And what could be more joyous than the look on her face as she unwraps a stunning new jewelry piece from Blue Nile? How about getting 50% off your purchase? Blue Nile offers premium quality, priced below traditional retail. Their online experts are available 24/7 to answer any questions and make sure you've picked the perfect gift. For a limited time, you can get 50% off at BlueNile.com. That's 50% off at BlueNile.com.
Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the credit card created by Apple. It gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can now choose to grow in a high-yield savings account that's built right into the Wallet app. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone and start growing your daily cash with savings today. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility requirements. Savings accounts provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC. Terms apply.
Welcome back to another episode of The Blue Turf. I think we're up to episode 3. Is that right now?
We are up to episode 3.
That's considered a streak.
That's right.
All right. Let's see. We have a lot to talk about, and I don't know how much time we'll get, if we'll get everything in, but a couple of games coming up this weekend. What do you see happening? There's a game Saturday, back at home on Sunday. A lot of crowd supposed to be there.
So let's start with... Yeah, I was going to say, let's start with Saturday. So road trip to Texas, first game in Mesquite for a while. Mesquite was in the league as an expansion team, and then they sat out during COVID, and then they're back. Some old faces on their roster, some new faces on their roster. A lot of players, I guess you could say, inherited from the Dallas Sidekicks. So Mesquite opened up the season last weekend with a 2-1 victory over Monterey Flash. A couple observations about that. Both teams were out of the MASL during COVID, and they're back. So I was mildly surprised with the result. I think it's going to be a question for Monterey in terms of visa availability for players coming into the U.S. So I wouldn't read too much into that result. What I would tell you is Mesquite has a fantastic goalkeeper. We saw him with St. Louis last year. Played one game with San Diego as well, Pollo Cortez. He's going to have a big game for Monterey, but they have, for Mesquite, but they have talent on that team. David Ortiz, Luis Morales, both came from the Sidekicks. Morales was Rookie of the Year. They have firepower on that team. I would expect a close game. Who's not going to be there is Nicolau Neto, who is facing a one-game suspension for the league from the St. Louis game at St. Louis. And so we'll see who's the starting goalkeeper for the Comets on Saturday night. And I don't have any predictions yet, Thad. Then you come to Sunday, but maybe we would pause there and talk about goalkeeping, my favorite topic.
Of course. Yeah, Neto out. I've been told there is no clear number one of who's next between Sway and Steven. Sway obviously has more indoor experience, but Steven is a really good keeper who's learning very quickly. And I've heard a lot of good things about him. What I've seen in practice is he's made some he's made some of those very rookie indoor mistakes, which is exactly what he's supposed to be doing in practice. So he learns. So it's going to be a very interesting choice of who Leo picks to start in there.
Yeah, and I think we saw something last weekend. We were not expecting rookie Mark Baker to start for the ambush against Kansas City, and he did, and he had a terrific game. And so I think that, I mean, for me, that kind of opens up the possibility that, well, if one team can start a rookie goalkeeper, anybody could start a rookie goalkeeper. But again, I don't have a sense which way the Comets are going to go. Speaking of St. Louis plays at Milwaukee on Saturday night. So the Wave will have their home opener Saturday. Then both Kansas City and Milwaukee travel to Kansas City for that, what could be an epic matchup Sunday afternoon at Cable Dahmer Arena.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. What my understanding is, it's almost sold out, or very, very, very close to it at this point. So
yeah, almost. Just a few hundred tickets left, which it will be great to have that atmosphere. I mean, a couple things about Milwaukee for sure. And if you've followed them in the press this past week, they were disappointed about last year. They saw this as an aberration. They see themselves as competing for the championship, the Ron Newman Cup, every year. And so there's some embarrassment over how they finished and performed last year. Few new faces on the team. Starts with goal. It always starts with goal. William Bonahene, otherwise lovingly known as Willie B, came over from Harrisburg, new starting goalkeeper for them. They also picked up Ben Raymond, quality defender from UCFC. And so they will be, I don't want to say they should be, they will be better than last year. Haven't talked yet about Derek Huffman. He and Neto kind of had an altercation incident last year, a memorable one at Cable Dahmer Arena. We'll see how they each perform and behave on Sunday, but I'll give you a free heads up here, Thad, that my halftime interview will be Neto for Sunday's game at Cable Dahmer Arena. So it's going to be interesting to get his take on everything happening in the league.
And I will have to keep my camera focused on those two, right?
I think it would be helpful. What I will tell you is I guest hosted a different show last Thursday night, and Willie B was on there, and we had a conversation about his transition to Milwaukee. Loves it, feels that this team has a lot to prove and demonstrate and reclaim their position in the upper echelons of the MASL. And he had really positive things to say about Derek Huffman as a teammate. I know Kansas City fans love to get on Derek Huffman, but I heard positives from Willie B about Derek in terms of his role on that Wave roster. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they fit. Just sort of incidentally, I did interview Derek Huffman. I don't know if you remember this, that day, Derek was my halftime interview. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him back. And Ian Bennett, what can you say about him? Every time he comes to Cable Dahmer Arena, he scores goals. And so we expect to see a lot of goals on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, it would be probably a good idea just to make sure they mark up on him. But he always does it, man. He's always so good. He's one of the few players around the league I would love to steal for the Comets.
Yeah, what's funny is he never wound up here, even during the COVID when he took a year and played for the Florida Tropics. There was no sense that he was coming to Kansas City, but could you imagine what it would be like to have Ian Bennett wearing the Comets red?
Yeah, that probably would have put the Comets over the top that year, but oh well.
Oh well.
Yeah, it was still a fun year. Well, on the field, at least.
Yep.
Going back to Neto for a second,
Mm-hmm.
He got those 4 blue cards, I think, right in those first 2 games, and now there's been a new rule change that I don't think we've had a chance to talk about. We've been jokingly calling it the Neto rule. But when a keeper gets a blue card, he actually has to go sit in the bench until that blue card is over. In the
penalty box. So this came up in one of the other broadcasts, is the distinction between the bench and the penalty box. So this is actually an old rule that got reintroduced. So for those of us who watched a lot of indoor soccer during the 1990s, this rule existed, which was if a goalkeeper gets a blue card or a yellow card, he has to go in the penalty box. What is similar to the rule that we're more familiar with now is the coach has to designate somebody to go into the penalty box who would be able to come out immediately after the blue, in the case of the blue card, after that penalty is killed. And then the goalkeeper could come out at the next dead ball substitution. With a yellow card, that's a longer experience in the sin bin. So 5 minutes plus potentially for that goalkeeper. It puts a premium now on having a solid backup who could come in at a moment's notice. And we saw this already occur in the Baltimore Utica game. Right off the bat, blue card on the goalkeeper. And so I don't know that it changes the strategy. And what the league said is this doesn't change strategy in the way that last year's goalkeeper possession rule did. So teams had to practice that. What do we do when the goalkeeper distributes to us? When can we play it back to them? When can't we play it back to them? So that required teams in training camp to get used to this. This is very different, Thad. This is ultimately, I've heard two officials say this: if your goalkeeper doesn't get in trouble, you're not going to have any problem. I paraphrase. I mean, ultimately, as long as your goalkeeper doesn't get a blue card or a yellow card, you're not going to have to do anything. But when your goalkeeper does, he, and in this case, it's a male league, he will have to atone for his sins directly and immediately in that sin bin.
Yeah, no, but it will make it more interesting because keepers will be coming off the bench cold and having to jump right into play. And, maybe they'll have 5 seconds to warm up, but it won't be much, I'm sure. The really interesting day will be when both keepers end up in the penalty box and they have to pull a six attacker.
Well, and this rule applies to six attackers as well. So if your sixth attacker draws a penalty, the sixth attacker is going into the penalty box. So we'll see throughout the year how this plays out, but just interesting. And I think that fans in particular wanted to connect it to Neto. My understanding is this is something the league had been looking at and felt like it was okay to introduce even after the year started, because this was very different practically than the goalkeeper possession rule that I mentioned earlier.
And and I'll be honest, I'm all in favor of this rule. I've actually said that this was what should happen in the past. I'm not in favor of changing it after 2 games, but you're right. It doesn't change the tactics of anything other. It's just now teams have to make sure they have that second keeper that's a real good keeper. So,
well, and you have to dress. I mean, it's clearly written in the rule book, you have to address 2 goalkeepers. So we can date ourselves that if you go way back to the end of the original MISL era, there were teams only dressing 1 goalkeeper.
Yeah.
And there are great horror stories of what happens when that number 1 goalkeeper gets hurt. Kansas City Comets experienced that once with Jim Gorsuch getting hurt against the San Diego Sockers and Jim Schwab having to play 6th attacker for most of the game. So teams now are not going to put themselves in a position. They have to have 2 goalkeepers. But as you said, that second goalkeeper better be ready to play.
Yeah, and that has been an issue. Sometimes in the past, I've seen the second keeper not be completely 100% fit, and they didn't want to risk him. So they did. A team has put in a keeper, a 6th attacker, maybe in the third quarter when the first keeper got hurt. So again, it'll be fun for the drama, if nothing else.
Sure.
Going back to these 2 games this weekend, not knowing which keeper will start, but my understanding is that we will have a rookie debut either Saturday or Sunday, probably Saturday, homegrown player Chase Bromstead.
So it's interesting is I had a conversation about Chase Bromstead here on campus with Park men's soccer coach Ephraim Shimless, who knew him when he was little and growing up, and we were talking about his pathway to the pros. And so here's somebody who, although he graduated from Park Hill South High School, he didn't play high school soccer. He was Sporting Kansas City Academy and moved his way up through the ranks, wound up playing at Tulsa D1, and a lot of promise. What's going to be interesting for him is the transition. So most kids now in Kansas City have played some sort of indoor soccer. It's not like they've come in cold indoor. it's just getting into the pace and the rhythm. Where do you need to be on the field? How do you make the transitions that you need to make? But the talent, he absolutely has it. And I think that what will help the Comets, not only this year, but over the next couple years, is developing that local core. Because ultimately, I think that's what makes Kansas City a perennially competitive MASL franchises. They've been successful at identifying local players, either homegrown local Kansas City talent or college players who played in and around Kansas City, as opposed to looking elsewhere for that next generation.
That has definitely been a strength for Kansas City. Players from Park, which you know very well, obviously, UMKC, the other one's right close, and even one's into the middle of Missouri. So that's been a big strength. And I've watched Chase since he was with Sporting Academy, and he was always a really good ball handler, very difficult to dispossess. That'll be definitely different a little in the indoor game. He's always kind of slight. He's not big, strong guy. But as he was a midfielder for Sporting Academy, when he went to college, he was still a kind of a holding midfielder, but they eventually moved him to left back, I believe. He was one of the outside back spots, either left or right, but I think it was left. And then he played with the Las Vegas Lights in USL Championship last year, also playing that outside back. And he wanted to come back and play in Kansas City with a hometown team. And so he's the one that actually reached out to see if he could come play for the Comets. So I look for him to be very good at some point in the future, but he's still a rookie in the indoor game. Like you said, it's every kid's played it, but the tactics, the pro level of tactics in indoor is far different than we're going to go play it for fun or even for an academy level team.
But the one thing he brings, just in terms of the positions he's played, somebody who can both play midfield and play defense. And then you start thinking about power play, either power play, kill, etc. He can plug in a lot of different ways. And so as a rookie, he can find meaningful playing time just because he offers Coach Leo Gibson some options in terms of how do I want to use him. And we saw this last year with Christian Andreas, who could play in a lot of different ways. Yeah. That ultimately, if you're a young player, gives you an advantage over other people is you can get plugged in here, there, and everywhere else, and then make your case for more playing time.
Speaking of Christian, my understanding is there's still a few players that are out with the visa issues that they were hoping to get resolved this week. But again, without being able to go into any details, because if I went into any details, I might say something wrong, and I don't want to be wrong about it. But hopefully there will be some more movement on that early next week.
Yeah, what I would say is tune into episode 4 of this podcast, and we should be having a conversation about visas.
But it won't help them for this weekend.
No impact on this weekend. And so, again, as you said, opportunity for somebody young, somebody to come in and fill a need for the Comets. And ultimately, I think if they can solve some or all of their visa issues, we'll get back to where we were at the start of the season, Thad, in terms of how we're thinking about the Comets. I think what you saw in those games against St. Louis, both in St. Charles and Kansas City, was a team that has a lot of good pieces, but didn't have everybody available and created some challenges for Coach Leo Gibson. If he gets those pieces back, then it's more of a question of who sits and who plays.
Yeah, it's whoever's better informed that week or maybe matches up against the other team better. It's every coach wants to have the problem of having too many people to pick from. They don't want it to be solved for them by not having enough players. Let's see. Do we need anything else we need to talk about for this weekend?
Well, other than I'm looking at the roster for the Milwaukee Wave, and I think one thing you can absolutely see is the tradition and the players, the core that Juliano Oliveira had. You have people who've won multiple championships. You have LSO Luan Oliveira. You have Marcio Leite. There are a lot of quality players. Somebody that has been a Comets killer in recent years, Alex Bradley, deadly with his left foot. And so if anybody is taking Milwaukee lightly, based on their record last year, I think that's very short-sighted. This is a team that will compete. One of the challenges that I think Milwaukee and Kansas City face, if you're looking at sort of the longer-term bad, is they both got moved from the Central Division along with St. Louis into what is now the Eastern Conference. And the schedule's not balanced, meaning that not every team plays any of their conference rivals the same amount of games.
Right.
Kansas City plays Milwaukee 6 times. Kansas City plays St. Louis 6 times. Milwaukee plays St. Louis 6 times. They're going to be battling it out throughout the year. Kansas City doesn't play Utica. Kansas City only plays Harrisburg 2 times, I believe that. And so what's going to be interesting to watch Milwaukee and Kansas City is if they beat each other up over these 6 games, what does that mean in the end of the season when you look at who's first place, who's second place, who's third place? And so I think this weekend is going to be telling because you'll have that first Milwaukee-St. Louis matchup on Saturday, and you'll have the first Milwaukee-Kansas City matchup on Sunday. And is this, will it give us the sense of what to expect the rest of the season, which is a lot of slugfest games happening in the Midwest, but how does that translate at the end of the season records?
Yeah, I think probably another week or so into this, we can break down that schedule a little bit more too, because you're right. It's not balanced. It's going to favor some teams that play other weaker teams more often, which is sad. I mean, I know this is a reality of how it is, but it's just sad that it may come down to Kansas City and Milwaukee could be 2 of the best teams, but end up in 3rd and 4th and not 1st or 2nd. Just by the way of.
Right. Well, and I had this conversation with Willie B and with Gio, the host of the podcast I was on, that there are some challenges in terms of the scheduling. I mean, I think that definitely gives some opportunities for Baltimore in the East. Florida, you would come to expect them to be really, really good regardless. Right. But if you look at the schedule, there is some imbalance. So I would encourage people, if you haven't watched Goals and Boards last week, you can definitely follow it on YouTube and you can hear what we had to say. And I think that the challenge for Kansas City is not to get caught up in hey, the schedule isn't balanced and woe is us. You ultimately have to win each game in front of you. Mesquite, last time they went there, they won. And if I remember correctly, it was a Friday night game. They won there. They went to Dallas that weekend and then lost. This is just a short trip down there. And ultimately, you have to win the games in front of you. Where the Comets have been challenged in recent years is consistent performance on the road. Sorry, they already lost their first game at St. Louis. They need some road W's. You can't just rely on winning at home because there will be losses at home inevitably. You need to start getting some road wins to build that momentum.
Yeah, and the Comets are already being in that challenged schedule because there's 4 games in the next 7 days essentially for them. It's going to be tough, and especially if they don't get some of the other players back off the visa issues. And with that being a little bit shorthanded and some players that are injured, they could end up quickly not at the top of the table where they deserve to be, and then having to battle their way back up and having to do it against these guys, the teams that are those conference rivals that we know are always going to be tough games, no matter whether they're is the same level of quality player or not. They're always going to be tough battles. Leo does not have an easy task over the next week or so to get those results so they don't drop below, down too far on the table.
So, and we talked about those teams in the Midwest. So Comets travel to Mesquite, then they have Milwaukee at home. What does it look like the following weekend? They go up to Milwaukee on Friday, come back home to play St. Louis on Saturday. So these games count double, right?
Right.
In some ways more than double, because you know that there are going to be battles between all 3. You want to stay ahead of both in the standings, and so each game matters that much more. Not to say this Mesquite game doesn't matter at all. A win is a win, regardless of where you have it. But when it's in conference, particularly these teams in the Midwest, you get a win and they get a loss. And that's ultimately what you want to do. You want to make your competition down. And so that's the challenge that Leo Gibson has, but it's also the opportunity he has over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's key to build a little momentum too. So moving on, we have, let's see, some other news that came out recently. And I think this is one that you were definitely wanting to talk about. A Hall of Fame voted into the Hall of Fame. I was trying to find the right words there. Steve Zungul. I'm never good at pronouncing names. But
it's Jungle. But Jungle. So Steve Zungul was known as the Lord of all indoors when he played for multiple teams, originally New York Arrows, wound up getting traded to what was then called the Golden Bay Earthquakes. We would know them today as the San Jose Earthquakes, played for the great San Diego Sockers in the late 80s, went up to Tacoma and then went back to San Diego. And so a lot of indoor fans, I've noticed on social media, were incredulous that he wasn't in the Hall already. I would say it's very, very difficult to make a case just on one's indoor career why you would be in the National Soccer Hall of Fame. But what Jungle has in terms of his time in America is that when he played for the Golden Bay Earthquakes, they played both indoor and outdoor in the NASL, and he was MVP of the outdoor team. So he showed that he could be the best of the indoor game and the best of the outdoor game in America, and put that resume up against anybody else. Definitely a strong case. Where I get a little bit challenged, I wasn't sure I was going to go down this road in this podcast, but why not, is that the San Diego Soccer's social media account has been trying to make the case that Jungle's number 7 should be retired across the MASL, which you could make an argument for. I have multiple arguments against, and one of my arguments, I'll try to connect some dots here at that. So I mentioned that Jungle played for the Sockers. He wore number 7. He wound up going to Tacoma. He wore number 7 there, and then he wound up coming back to San Diego. He did not wear number 7 when he came back to San Diego. He wore number 21. And why is that? Because number 7 at the time was being worn by Zoran Karic, who arguably is one of the top 5, 10 ever indoor soccer players in the United States. So my little take on this is, if Jungle's number 7 is that holy and the Sockers say it should be retired, well, why didn't they give him number 7 when they got him back from Tacoma way back when? And so we'll see if this gets any legs. But regardless of all that, I don't think that anybody can refute the fact that Jungle was one of the best ever indoor soccer players in the history of the game. And should I be invited to vote on the all-time team when the 50th anniversary of the original missile happens in 2028, he'll be on my first team ballot.
Oh yeah, I would completely agree with that, but I would also completely agree they should not be retiring any number across the league, no matter who.
Well, I'll give you another example. He was great in a different league, which was the Major Indoor Soccer League. And I think that one of the challenges for the Major Arena Soccer League today is there are too many people of your and my generation who long for the days of yore and talk about, oh, how wonderful life was back in the 80s, which is sort of easier to couch with rose-colored glasses, Dad, because there was no social media. There weren't all the other distractions back then. But ultimately, the Major Arena Soccer League needs to make a case for indoor soccer today, not the way indoor soccer was back then. And so I would caution anybody to make yet another move that focuses on the past but doesn't project into the future.
Yeah, and I think we were going to touch on this on almost every podcast, because I think we talked about it a little bit last time, a similar thing. We can long for the old days and respect them and all that sort of thing, but they weren't perfect. If they were perfect, nothing would have changed. They would still be, all those teams would still be in existence. That league would still be in existence. Obviously, it was not, everything was perfect, rose-colored glass look back then. So I would, that'd be great if the exact same Kansas City Comets ownership was still going, but that's not the case. That's not the case with any of these teams. So,
Let me throw one other nugget for your consideration. If this makes sense, honoring somebody who was great in another league for today, why shouldn't Major League Soccer retire 10 for Pele? Because you can't think of soccer in the United States the way it is now if Pele never came here in the 70s. So why not just tell the teams now, retire number 10 for somebody who played in a previous league multiple decades ago? There's some parallels in that argument.
Definitely, I do maybe see a little more direct lineage between these leagues than the old NASL and MLS, but there is lineage there, definitely. I'm just not in favor. I'm really not in favor of retiring jerseys, retiring numbers across an entire league, with some very, very rare exceptions. So,
well, I'm not even in favor of retiring jerseys in one market without very clear criteria. And I think that both Alan Mayer and Gino Schiraldi have stood the test of time, but you should have done so much to justify why nobody ever should wear your number again. I think the threshold has to be, whether you're talking about it on a individual market level or a league level, the threshold needs to be so high that there's no doubt why that decision's been made.
And even within market, I could see something like you retire a certain number for, say, 5 years, but you hang the banner up there to honor that person forever. But you give it a breath of air time, so it has been honored. But players, there's certain numbers in soccer that mean things, and it's hard to retire them. If you're a baseball player and you retire number 47, maybe, or whatever, who cares? There's a lot of other numbers, they don't mean as much, except for if you're honoring a previous player. Let's see. I think we had one other bit of news that we were planning on talking about was Brian Basinski, co-owner, managing partner of the Comets, has recently acquired Wimsel, as I know it, Western Missouri Soccer League, and the grounds where they played at, with goal towards developing youth sports up in the Northland a little bit more. I know my daughter's played there in the past, and
my son too.
Sometimes the fields were more like playing pachinko than they were soccer, but they'd improved, and I can see Bud doing a lot of great improvements on that.
Well, and I have a sweet spot, or a soft spot, I should say, for grass fields. I grew up playing grass as a kid. We have grass here at Park University. We're one of the few schools that actually still competes on grass. But for the outdoor game, ultimately, the goal is, if you want to be a professional, you better learn how to play on grass, because artificial turf is kind of frowned upon at the professional level. And so, in a way, Brian Basinski is bucking the trend where everybody's looking at suburban turf fields. Yeah, there's benefits to them in terms of what you can do during the winter months and when it's raining, et cetera. But at least for now, and I haven't had this conversation in terms of what the future plan is, he's investing in a prominent grass facility. And I think that will, if done well, and he's going to make that commitment, this gives kids in the Kansas City area and others visiting there a real surface experience, which I think is great. That doesn't take away with anything he's done indoors, both with the Comets and then with the soccer dome. It just provides something, and could be something special that doesn't exist elsewhere in the Kansas City market.
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to have him on a one-off pod to hear what his plans are and talk about that sort of thing. But I know for like my daughter, when she was playing, she's just in college now, so she's not playing soccer anymore, or at least in a official capacity. She loved playing on grass, but she also loved playing on turf. But she was also, 95 pounds, and when she fell down, it didn't hurt like when some of these other guys get slammed into it or hurts their knees. I would love to actually see a mixed surface where there's a couple of turf fields and some grass fields and stuff like that. I don't know if that's ever in his plans. I just want to see good fields, quality fields. And it used to be several locations in town had good grass fields, and they would vary in quality during the year and use and weather and all that stuff. But now it's hardly, none of them are being played, at least at a higher level than rec. And I hope that there will be more than just rec games there.
Right. Totally agree with that.
All right. Last chance for any wild card subjects to throw out there, Erik.
Well, other than this weekend, as we're recording this, the Comets just posted on social media a graphic of Lucas Sosa with the text, "Lucas wants to see you Saturday on Twitch and Sunday at Cable Dahmer Arena." So I would invite Comets fans, other MASL fans to tune in for sure on Saturday for that call in Mesquite. If you can join us in person and there's not that many tickets available, we'd love to see you at Cable Dahmer Arena. But if not, Nick Bassos and I will be on the call once again for local broadcast purposes, 38th The Spot in Kansas City and everywhere else across the country and worldwide on Twitch. And as I said, we'll be interviewing Nicolau Neto that will run at halftime. I'll be curious to hear what he says, get his take maybe on the new goalkeeper rule. I haven't finalized my questions, Thad, but I'm working on them. And then it's always a battle, Kansas City and Milwaukee. And usually the fourth quarter makes the difference. So I'm excited about this weekend.
Yep. Milwaukee, always a great battle. Derek Huffman should be entertaining, and just having a packed house. It's been, the Comets have been doing well with attendance, but it's, kind of going back to pre-pandemic levels again. So that's really nice to see. All right. Wish luck to the Comets this weekend. Good luck to you and on your call. I mean, not that you need luck because you and Nick are, two of the pros, but appreciate having you on again, Erik.
Thanks as always, Thad. Look forward to episode 4. Maybe we can talk about visa updates, and we'll definitely do a playback of what we saw in Mesquite and here against Milwaukee, and then a preview of what to expect next weekend at Milwaukee, and then home once again against the Ambush.
Cool. Thanks for your time. Bye.
Thank you. See ya.